Hiya Tim, sorry about the random bounce fasting thing there. I'm just going to take you through today the reading questions for on paper 2 and how to structure them. Now, nothing should be new here. We have done this in year 9 when you did the prisons paper that you all hated, and you also have done 2 of these question styles already when early on in the year when we did the fiction paper 1, when we were doing Emma and Robbie and those questions. They'll all be in your pink book. So you already have had practice at a lot of these question styles. On this paper, sorry, just to say, can you just make these notes on line paper? They're going to go in your language folder. These notes don't need to go in your pink book. So there's 3 10-mark questions. There's 6 questions in total. 2 of the questions are just the straightforward comprehension questions like you did in last lesson. One of them is a synthesis question, which we'll talk about at a later date, and the remaining 3 are the 10-mark questions. Now, you have already done 2 of those. You've done a how question. How does the writer blah 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 convey his views or make it seem, create the impression. You've already done evaluation questions, which on paper 1 are phrased as to what extent do you blah blah blah. So do you remember it was to what extent do you think Robbie has changed? That was your evaluation questions for paper 1. And then the different one, the one that you've not seen since year 9, is a comparison question, but that is so straightforward. It's so similar to the how question. You literally just need to throw some connectives in there. So it's really, really straightforward. Nothing's new, but I just thought you'd need a reminder before I ask you to have a go in evaluation question today. So every question, if you remember, will ask you to focus on what the writer says and how the writer uses language and structure to whatever, convey the views or whatever the question is. Now, hopefully you remember that most of our marks come from the what marks. So we need to be pinning down what the writer has said, and we do not want 10 sentences focusing on similes and metaphors and short sentences and other bizarre techniques. We just need the majority of our answer to show the examiner we understand what the writer is saying. We can pin down our inferences. We are good readers. Yeah? Okay, so hopefully you can remember this, the root of every 10-mark language response, that sort of sentence structure that we always use. You start with the writer uses. If you're looking for a how mark, a method mark, then you are going to use a technique, but you don't need to. You've got your quotation, which is essential. Sorry, my cue's a bit off there. And then you finish off with an inference or an effect. So what's the writer highlighting? What are they suggesting? And that's it. Remember, you can use the same formulaic sentence structure over and over because this is language. It's a methodical approach, scientific approach to picking apart the text. And remember that you're going to track the text as well. Can you just write down, track the text in your notes, because I have not actually written on the PowerPoint. Okay, so just alternatives to suggest. Try to avoid means. Remember, we want to stay quite open still. Something that we nick from literature. So we can use imply, highlights, emphasizes, creates the impression, indicates, generates the idea, anything like that will be fine if you want to jot down some alternatives. I know some of you get a bit frustrated with writing the exact same sentence, so this could help you to jazz it up a bit. Right, the only difference with this sentence structure that you need to apply for the evaluation is you just need to include I think or I feel at the start of your sentences, so that you're kind of addressing the core of the question, which is asking you a little bit more to have your own personal response to weigh up your own thoughts about what the writer's saying. But don't forget that at the end of the day, in this question, the examiner is just looking to see if you understand the text. They still just want to know if you understand what the writer's saying. Don't ever forget that, because that's where the majority of your marks will come from. So just think about it in terms of you're looking at the same sentence structure that you use for everything else, the one that we've just gone through, but you're just going to put I think or I feel at the start. Now, because you're putting I think or I feel at the start, it's quite hard to go straight into a quotation. You need to do your inference first. So, for example, I think or feel, inference, when the writer uses, then either just put your quotation or include your technique as well if you're looking for a how mark. Okay, so it's just a case of reversing. Now, as well, you can always start with inferences first on a how question and a comparison question as well. It's up to you. I think we just sort of got into the habit, haven't we, of starting with our quotation. Right, the only other difference for the comparison question then, you can use that exact sentence structure at the top. You just need to include some comparative connective so that you're showing the examiner that you are focusing on comparison. Now, obviously, the comparison question takes a little bit more work because you need to look at two texts and you need to bring together similar points. So there's more work before you start writing with the comparison question. But in terms of how you actually structure it, it's exactly the same, just throw in those howevers and those similarities. Okay, so the evaluation question we're going to focus on now, and that's question 4 in your exam. Sometimes it's question 14 for some bizarre reason. They start with question 11 and go through to 16 because why not? So there's 3 different phrases, or ways of phrasing this question that have come up so far. So you just need to kind of watch out for them. But in every past paper, it's always been question 4, the evaluation question. So, you should know your order anyway. But obviously, if knowing our luck, it'll be the one year they change the order. So just double check. So you're looking for phrases like, what are your thoughts and feelings on? To what extent do you agree with the writer? Or how successfully do you think the writer has conveyed his or her views? If you get the last one, please do not trash the writer. They're not looking for that. Like they want you to, it looks like they want you to say, yes, they were successful in this way, but they weren't successful in this way. But they don't really, because this is a professional writer who has obviously had their work published in some format. So they're really looking for you to kind of identify what has made it successful. What have they included and how have they used language successfully? Okay. Right, so what I'm going to ask you to do for today's lesson is I'm going to ask you to read the text on the worksheet, and then I'm going to ask you to answer this evaluation question. So what are your thoughts and feelings on the Agora school? And you're going to consider what the writer teaches you about the school, and remember that's where most of your marks are going to come from, and also how the writer uses language to shape your ideas. Now, I've made this an 8 marker, not a 10 marker, which means I only want you to aim for 8 marks and therefore only 8 sentences. Remember, we should be getting a mark per sentence. So remember, from those 8 sentences, the majority should be what marks. Don't really be aiming for more than 3 how marks in terms of how the writer uses language. And then I'd like you to send me an image of your 8 sentences, please, because these are going to go into your pink book. And I'm going to use some of your images as part of the feedback on Thursday so that you can see what a good answer looks like, look for common errors, and I'll give you a little mark scheme as well. Okay, so just so you're not launching in on your own, I've got 2 example sentences for you, a what mark and a how mark, and you can use these as part of your 8 if you want to, or you can challenge yourself to just start from scratch. You might have different thoughts and feelings than me anyway. It's a very interesting school. I like to work there. Okay, so this is my what mark. At the start of the text, because remember I'm tracking the text, I'm going to start at the beginning. I feel the school is structured very differently to a normal school. When the writer says, tear down the dividing walls, kids of all levels thrown together. So I've got my I feel, so I'm focused on the evaluation question. I'm also focused on the question because the question actually asks that. I've got my inference, the school is structured very differently to a normal school. And I've got my quotation to complete my what mark there. So it's really straightforward. Just your same basic ingredients of quotation plus inference, and you just added I feel onto the front. Right, for the how mark, the method mark, I can never remember which one I use here, can I? Right, the writer then makes me, the word then indicates that we're moving through the text, we're tracking the text, makes me feel the outcome is impressive and beautifully disorganised when he uses the adjective in colourful chaos. So we've got, starting with the writer, which is always a good idea. We've still got writer in the what question as well, just in the middle. We've got the word feel again, so we're focused on the question and we're evaluating. The outcome is impressive and beautifully disorganised are our inferences. Now, if you just think about how that links to the quotation, impressive, there's the indication there that he is impressed by something if he's calling it a colourful chaos. That's not a phrase you would use for something that you think is awful. The word beautiful is an inference from colourful, that we generally associate something that's colourful as being beautiful or attractive. And then the disorganised is where the chaos comes in. But I think the phrase beautifully disorganized really pins down what is meant by colourful chaos. It's not organized, everything's everywhere, but it's beautiful. It's something that's attractive and appealing to him as a writer, and therefore me as a reader. So when I use my technique adjective, I don't need that. You wouldn't necessarily need to use the word adjective there. And you've got the quotation, then I've got my hallmark, because I'm looking at the writer's use of language, and the fact that that word colourful really makes a massive difference, doesn't it? If it just said chaos, it would have a completely different meaning. So that's a really good hallmark in terms of where one word has shaped our response and our thoughts and feelings to the school. Okay, so hopefully that's enough to get you started. Please don't, if you are struggling to write 6 more, you've got quite a lot of text to choose from. There's definitely at least 6 more points. You could make it a 10 mark if you wanted. Please do get in touch and I can give you some hints, like I could maybe give you some quotations that you can base your answer off. So please don't struggle if you're not sure, just get in touch with me and I'll help you out. But hopefully that's enough to get you going, and please remember to send me a picture so that I can collate them for some feedback. All right, thanks guys, bye.